All right, welcome everyone to Understanding the Basics of Organic Production. My name is Audrey Thompson. I am a staff attorney here with the Penn State Center for Agricultural and Shale Law and the director of this Understanding Agricultural Law educational series. This is a course designed to provide subject matter literacy and competence on fundamental issues of agricultural law to attorneys and business advisors who work with or represent rural or agricultural clients, but who may not necessarily specialize in agricultural law. This series is wholly sponsored by the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Ag Business Development Center, established through the 2019 Pennsylvania Farm Bill. The Agricultural Business Development Center aims to enhance the long-term vitality of Pennsylvania farms by supporting farm transitions, both from generation to generation and from conventional to organic farming, supporting beginning farmers, providing risk management education, and providing financial assistance through low-interest loans and grants. As you can see, we've covered numerous topics so far in this series, including ag labor and the Fair Labor Standards Act, ag cooperatives, and the farm credit system, crop insurance, conservation programs, Pennsylvania's Clean and Green program, and many, many more. You can find materials and recordings from all of these webinars on our Understanding Agricultural Law landing page on our website at aglaw.psu.edu. Upcoming topics in our Understanding the Basics of Ag Law series include producer protections for buyer default, Pennsylvania's Agricultural Area Security Law, and the Clean Water Act in agriculture. I'll also let you know we're planning in July, we're going to do an agritourism program, and then in August an H2A program, but we're still working out the details of those. All of our programs are on Fridays. They're all at noon, and registration is up and available for those on our website. I'll also mention a couple of other programs coming up, the quarterly dairy legal webinar in April. That's going to be an overview of U.S. state milk pricing systems. And then in July, we're going to do international pricing and supports on Canada. And then I'll also just mention here orally that we are partnering again with the Pennsylvania Agricultural Ombudsman Program to offer another acre presentation. I think that one's going to be in June, so just stay tuned with that. That'll feature Robert Willig, the Senior Deputy Attorney General from Pennsylvania's Office of Attorney General, and then our own Brooke Dorr. And finally, just a few reminders before I turn this webinar over. This webinar is being recorded. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A feature, and I will collect those and ask them at the end. And we encourage you to fill out the survey that we're going to post at the end. Please tell us what you like, what we can improve, and what topics you'd like to see in the future. And if you would like us to submit this program for free CLE credits to the PA CLE board, we have posted a link in the chat. You need to fill out that form to get your credits. As part of our responsibility, we're going to say a code word near the end of this program. You'll be prompted to fill out, put that code word in the chat there. If you are listening to this on the phone, I don't think we have any phone-ins right now, but please send me an email, aet17@psu.edu, and I will send you the form. We'll also post it here in the chat a couple more times throughout the program. So, all right, I will now turn this program over to Jackie Schweikler. Jackie is a staff attorney at Penn State Law's Center for Agricultural and Shale Law, where she researches numerous agricultural law issues, oversees student research assistants, serves as the primary author for the Shale Law Weekly Review, and manages Pennsylvania's Agriculture Mediation Program. Jackie, the screen is all yours.
All right, thank you, Audrey. Okay, so I'm going to dive right in and get into it. This is the basics of organic production, but I wanted to start off with some of these terms that are often involved in the conversation with organic. So sustainable, free trade, because a lot of times you'll see those on the same label, or maybe, you know, in the same, it's always in the same conversation. So I wanted to talk about those briefly. But for those of you who already know the difference, I promise I'm not going to take too much time on this. So we'll start off with sustainable agriculture. This is just a nice little graphic showing a simple framework for sustainable farming. So sustainable agriculture, this was defined in the 1990 Farm Bill. I've put in a simplified definition, something a little easier to digest. So the definition that I've created is farming that meets food and textile needs without compromising the environment. And if you are very interested in that long Farm Bill definition, the link for that is on this slide here. So what I have on this slide is that the definition makes no distinction between conventional and organic production. So this is important because not all organic production is sustainable, and it's possible that maybe a conventional farm may be sustainable where an organic one is not. So there's a documentary on Netflix that's about avocados, and avocados are such a good example because farmers could use organic methods and be certified as, these are certified organic avocados. However, let's just say, for example, those avocados are being grown year-round in regions that are not meant for avocados, and avocados require a ton of water. So if you're shipping millions of gallons of water to your farm, you might not be able to get a sustainable label for what you're producing. The other key point to sustainability is that the question of whether or not the farm is economically viable. So the farm can't be operating in the red or, bankrupt essentially if they're trying to be listed as sustainable. And my last point is that it's a, farm by farm basis. It's not a one size fit all test. All these different factors are considered when determining whether or not a farm is sustainable. Okay, so that's all I'm doing on sustainable. We're going to jump to fair trade. So fair trade is similar to that of, organic and sustainable, just as far as like promotion and marketing and the idea. But one of the main differences is that this is actually a social movement. There's no regulations. We don't have laws or anything telling people how to do fair trade. Fair trade certification comes from organizations that provide certification based on private standards. So compliance is going to be enforced through private contractual arrangements. If you are certifying your operation as fair trade, that's going to give your consumers confidence that what they're purchasing is going to comply with those fair trade standards. And so really what this is something that shines as a marketing tool, something that you can market your products, and people feel good when they make a purchase that has this fair trade label. So again, I have another short definition of it, and that is fair trade is a method to ensure that our food is grown in an environmentally friendly way by farmers who are treated fairly. So we'll talk about this a little bit more on the next slide. Now, even without an official legal definition, the definition of fair trade that you can find is pretty extensive. They like to include a lot. Normally, I have 9 separate slides on this, but I squeezed them all into this one slide just to give you a general overview of fair trade. So it's all about creating opportunities for marginalized producers. It's all about prompt pay, fair pay, environmental stewardship. We have rights of children. So, they're not necessarily in favor of child labor, even though you are allowed to have your children help on the farm. So there's a little nuance there. And, they do respect people's cultural identity. And so, something that would be a tradition where that farm is located, that's going to be respected in fair trade. These are just some logos that you probably have seen in fair trade, just to, you've seen this on a dozen packages in the supermarket. Oh, and I did want to also mention that in the US, you'll probably see most of the certification by that one that's in the middle, Fair Trade USA. That's a private nonprofit organization. So that one I think is probably the most common in the US, but and then on this slide, I just have some hyperlinks for those of you who have the slides, which are on our website. So if you want to look into this a little bit more, here are some resources for you. And the first link actually has a 5-minute video on fair trade, which is very convenient if you're looking for more information, but not a lot more information. So these are some resources for you. Now, fair trade and sustainability actually sound really similar, I think. And so I took some of the key points from each of the slides, and I created this combined slide to compare them. So, you got all those different things listed here. But instead of going through this line by line and making this very long and very confusing, I'm just going to go to this slide here, where this is just fair trade. What it does is it certifies fair treatment of agricultural workers. Sustainability, that's more about the efficient use of natural resources and environmental preservation. Hopefully that makes sense. And now we're going to move on and spend the rest of our time on organic farming. I love this graphic. This is from USDA, and it's just a perfect summary of organic farming. So if you are completely unfamiliar with organic, this is your one-stop one slide stop, you can get everything off of this. So for produce and grains, if it's considered organic, you expect that it's going to have natural fertilizers. It's going to have eco-friendly pest control. So you're not expecting to see a lot of pesticides. You're going to expect that the soil and water for that produce will be protected. And then if you're purchasing something that's meat, dairy, or eggs, you're expecting those animals to be raised on pasture. You're expecting humane treatment, and you're expecting that they were not treated with growth hormones or antibiotics. And lastly, if you're purchasing a packaged good at the store, you're expecting there's probably not going to be any GMOs, that the product has been traced directly from the farm all the way to the store where you're purchasing it. And that it shouldn't have artificial colors, flavors, or preservatives. This is a very, very general definition, and there are a lot of exceptions, which we're going to talk about. But I love this because it really simplifies it and makes it easy to take in. Okay, on the next few slides, I have what I call my fun facts that I found on the National Ag Statistics Service website. All of this data is based on a 2021 farm survey that was released December 2022. And I think this is the most up to date that they have at the moment. So even though we're talking about a couple of years ago, this is the data. This is what we have. First, it's important to talk about that the organic industry is actually the fastest growing segment of agriculture in the United States. So as of 2021, sales of food and non-food organic products reached $57.5 billion. And in the US, there's over 17,000 certified organic farms. It's a lot of farms. And I don't know about you, but I love a color fade map. I feel like this really brings everything into perspective for me. And so you can actually, when you're looking at this, see where the concentrations of organic farms are located. So on this, the dark red states have 1,000 or more farms, whereas the light yellow states have fewer than 50 organic farms. And then for those of you who actually prefer to see a list, don't worry, I have that on the next slide. So on this slide, these are the top 10 states by certified organic sales. Again, this data is all from the 2021 National Ag Statistics Survey. So things might have changed a little bit since then, but as of 2021, you can see that California is listed as #1 for sales, followed by Washington and then Pennsylvania. And then after Pennsylvania, in #4, we have Texas, Oregon. In 6, we have New York, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Michigan, and Colorado at #10. Since this webinar is being brought to you by Penn State and we're in Pennsylvania, I'm also going to include a couple Pennsylvania specific facts. So Pennsylvania is currently listed as #1 in organic livestock and poultry. And we're going to talk a lot about livestock and poultry. So that's particularly interesting for this presentation. And with those sales, they have sales reaching $730 million. And they're also #1 in organic mushroom sales at $95.4 million. Now, the ranking for mushrooms is probably less surprising for those of you who are familiar with Pennsylvania and agriculture, because we know that Pennsylvania is a powerhouse when it comes to producing mushrooms. The last point on this slide is the total number of certified organic farms for Pennsylvania, which is 1,125. There are only 3 states with more than 1,000 certified organic farms. Pennsylvania ranks at #3, right behind Wisconsin and New York. All right, now that we're all warmed up, we're going to move from our fun facts to our government acts. First up is the Organic Foods Production Act, and we're going to be on this act pretty much for the volume of this presentation, and we'll be referring back to it. So the Organic Foods Production Act was created in 1990, and this is what started certification uniformity for organics. So created uniformity, it makes it possible for businesses to create an organic market. So entrepreneurs can now export organic products. The key takeaway here is that this is the federal regulation for organic certification. Like everything kind of ballooned from this. And that's why I've created this slide as my map. So as we're talking about this, I'll be coming back to this slide frequently and highlighting the different sections as we work our way through them. And first, we're going to start with the National Organic Standards Board. So the National Organic Standards Board makes recommendations for organic standards and the implementation process. The board is made up of 15 members. And this is a really nice selection. It's pretty varied. So you have 4 employees from organic farms, 6 environmental chemical activist members, 2 employees from organic food processors, or organic store owner, an ecologist, and an employee from an organic certification company. So it's a pretty diverse board, which is really interesting to see. And it's very specific in the act of who the members are meant to be. Okay, so the most recognizable part of the Organic Foods Production Act is the National Organic Program. And we're obviously going to spend most of our time on this section. So the National Organic Program began in 2000, and it's commonly abbreviated as NOP. So I might say NOP or NOPE by accident. But the National Organic Program, it's administered by the Agricultural Marketing Service. And I have a link to the website on this page in case you want to read for hours and hours about it. So under the program, it certifies products that are organically produced. So when you pick something up at the grocery store and the label says USDA organic, it's been certified by the National Organic Program. Before the program started in 2000, organic products were certified by private organizations. These private organizations made their own rules with voluntary standards, or they were based on state law. From state to state, it was really hard for a while to tell what counted as organic. And some of you probably remember this, what's organic? That was kind of the question for a long time. Now, under the National Organic Program, state officials or private persons can be accredited as organic certifying agents. Each state can have its own certification for producers and handlers. The caveat here is that for states, the certification standards have to be more strict than the standards in the National Organic Program. So if a state wants to amend their program, they need to submit that amendment to USDA to get it approved. And actually, I just want to say on that, I think the only state that has their own program right now is California, I believe. So what do you do if you want to get your operation certified as organic? First, you have to submit an organic production or handling plan to an accredited certifying agent. The agent is going to complete an on-site inspection and check your records. It's not a free process and it's not necessarily a cheap process, but there are a ton of federal programs out there to help out with costs and fees. And if we have time, I'm hoping to get to a couple of those at the end. So if you have a business operation and that you want to have certified as organic, when you submit your organic production handling plan, the plan has a list of requirements that it has to meet. It needs to, and this is what this slide is. So the plan needs to be in writing. It has to describe all the practices and procedures and the frequency with which they will be performed. It has to describe each substance that's going to be used in production. You have to establish monitoring practices. And this is something I've talked a lot about in liability. You're checking everything constantly. You're not just like, I'm assuming that this is going to be done correctly. You have to describe the producer or handler's record system, and you have to just describe any practices or physical barriers used to prevent commingling of organic and non-organic products. And that's something really important, especially if you are operating any kind of conventional system next to your organic system. You're going to want to make sure that, anything that you're applying, like pesticides or anything like that, on your conventional part of your property, and that's not going to, in some way, move over to your organic section. So speaking as a consumer, how do you find out whether a business is certified as organic? It's pretty straightforward, actually, with this website. This is the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service website, and this is their Organic Integrity Database. This slide is a little bit old, so I apologize for the date, but you can click on the link, and if you download the slides from our website, you can click on this slide specifically because the picture is hyperlinked, and it will take you straight there. And what's really cool is you can actually look at farms and businesses worldwide. So this is something that's kind of fun and interesting if you're interested in learning more about different businesses and organics. You can spend a lot of time on there. Okay, so moving on. This fun fact gets its very own slide because it's important and it's a common misconception. People often think that when they purchase something that's certified USDA organic, they're getting a product every time. That's 100% never touched by a pesticide ever, no matter what. That's not necessarily true. There are some exceptions and things that are considered pesticides, but are still considered organic. We'll talk about the national list, and for those of you who know what that is, you know what I mean. Now, under the National Organic Program, there are a few different labels that you're going to see. This is probably the most practical slide application of organic labeling. So if you're in the grocery store, the supermarket, this is the stuff that you're looking for if you want to buy something that is organic. So the one on the top, 100% organic. That does mean that all ingredients in the product are organically produced. So it has to be 100% organic. So if there's any prohibited substance in there, they can't use the 100% organic label. And then the second one is just organic, that is at least 95% organic ingredients. And then the last one is made with organic ingredients. That means at least 70% of the ingredients are organically produced. And for those of you like me who likes things with a picture, this is just a really nice graphic that's published by USDA on what we just talked about in the last slide. This is really helpful because it shows the different percentages, and you can see that the seal on the top section here, that's used for 100% organic, and the seal is also used for products with 95% organic ingredients. But the seal is not to be used with products that fall into this third category. So things with the made with organic, they're not going to get the seal, or this seal anyways. Okay, now let's talk about land management under the National Organic Program. So any parcel of land from which organic crops are to be harvested must have been properly managed. So the seeds and the planting stock have to be from organic sources. There's organic standards for pests, weeds, disease management. And you can do things like crop rotation and cover crops in order to maintain and improve your soil health. So the letter of the law reads that the producer must select and implement tillage and cultivation practices that maintain or improve the physical, chemical, and biological condition of soil and minimize soil erosion. And like it says on here, a great way to protect the soil from erosion is cover crops. And you can harvest the cover crop if you want to, but you don't have to. And there's a ton of other benefits, weed suppression, biomass, and habitats for pollinators, things like that. Now, when it comes to land management and soil additives, there's a lot of rules about manure and sewage sludge or biosolids. So manure has to be composted unless it's applied to land not intended for growing crops for human consumption. So if it's not food that we're going to eat, you can apply it there, but there's specific rules. So you have to add it at least 90 to 100 days or 120 days before harvest of the edible portion of the crop. Can't use sewage sludge or biosolids at all. But you are allowed to add any sort of plant material. So if you have, leaves or other plant scraps, you can add those to the soil, and that's fine. And then other synthetic substances, we'll talk about the national list later, but it has to be on the national list of approved substances if you want to include it. So with livestock and poultry production, there's a bunch of different standards for that as well. So the food that you're feeding those animals, that has to meet the standards in the NOP. There's some medications that you're allowed to use, but you're not allowed to use subtherapeutic doses. And then animals on pasture, there has to be a plan in place for management of that pasture and keeping it in compliance. So going back to subtherapeutic doses, though, on my second bullet point here, I did want to mention that a little bit because I don't know, I didn't learn anything about subtherapeutic uses in law school, but what that means is including a low dose of antibiotics in the animal feed for an extended period of time. And the idea behind this, the reason that farmers will do this is because it can increase the growth rate of the animal, improve the feed utilization, and reduce mortality and morbidity. It keeps the animals, healthy. The problem is a lot of people, this isn't organic, and people are against this because using these antibiotics over and over again, consistent like this, increases the number of antimicrobial resistant bacteria. And many people argue that this can compromise the treatment of human bacterial infections. So this is an ongoing problem, an ongoing discussion, and something that is prohibited under the National Organic Program. Okay. Usually you can ignore most of my graphics, but this one is pretty much exactly what I would put in my PowerPoint. So I just threw it up here and I'm cheating and I'm using it as my slide. So these are the important organic pasture rules. So dairy animals have to graze outdoors for the entire grazing season. And the grazing season does depend on the climate, but it has to be at least 120 days a year. And for that bullet point, it does say at least 120 days a year. So depending on the climate of the region, that actually might translate to every day of the year or some variation of that, right? And another rule is that 30% of dry matter intake during the grazing season must be from pasture. So they have to be able to have some feed, some food from the earth itself, and not just, bucket of feed here and there. And let's see, the rules apply to each animal, farmers, and then the last thing is farmers have to have a pasture management plan to protect water and soil quality, which we talked about that a little bit. So we already kind of need that. Okay, so those of you who keep up with recent developments, you may already know about this, but we have a new standard for organic livestock and poultry. So very generally, this was the rule was published in November 2023. The effective date is January 12th, 2024, just a couple months ago. And I have the hyperlinks here. So in case you want to spend hours and hours reading them, you feel free. So some of these new requirements. There's specific space and stocking density requirements for indoor and outdoor spaces. So when it comes to poultry, there's two calculations that you're allowed to use. You can do it by the weight of the bird or the number of the bird. Problem is, as your poultry ages, especially when you're using, some birds will gain a lot of weight. And so when you're doing the calculation by weight, it can be very complicated. So it actually says right in the rule that maybe just do it by the number of the bird if you don't want to have a headache. It might be a little bit easier, but you can do either one. Both options are available to you. And the poultry must have access to year-round outdoor spaces. And you are allowed to confine them for limited periods of time in specific situations. And then they also prohibit under this rule porches as an outdoor space. So something that covers the ground and keeps the bird from actually contacting like earth and dirt and grass. That's considered a porch and it's prohibited. And then they also require weekly ammonia monitoring. For livestock mammals, this is any of those critters. You have to have room for the animals to move, stretch, and express natural behaviors for over a 24-hour period. So the animals have to have room to move. And they also need to have unrestricted outdoor access year-round. And then for swine, they have to have access to rooting materials and then group housing. So something that they can, again, like root around in the dirt and really just live their best life. Okay, I think that's the last slide on this that I have. And other requirements are that this rule is prohibiting physical alterations. So teeth clipping, induced molting, things like that. Those are prohibited now. And there are some exceptions, and it's a lengthy list of exceptions for safety or identification purposes. And then anytime that you have a sick or injured animal, that has to be documented. So anything, downer cows, anything like that, that has to be documented, and they have to be treated. And if they can't be treated, they have to be euthanized according to those rules. And those are the new requirements. Oh, and I do have another slide. So animals have to be identified and have to have the ability to walk. And transport systems have to be suitable to the climate to protect animals from extreme temperatures. This one's very interesting because, a lot of times you're driving through states with these animals, and if you're driving through Pennsylvania right now, it's very cold. And so you have to make sure that whatever you're transporting them with, if you want that animal to be certified organic, you have to make sure that they are comfy and cozy. And then I think this is the last point, that they have to comply with the USDA Food Safety Inspection Service Humane Slaughter Standards. And there's actually a Humane Methods of Slaughter Act that I have linked down here below. So if you have more questions about that or interested in learning more. So in order to compliance for these new rules is going to be January 2nd, 2025. But poultry, there are some exceptions for that. So poultry operations have a little bit more time. They don't have to meet these requirements until January 2nd, 2029. Okay, we are back to our outline slide. And so we're going to move now into some of the prohibited practices. So I have a question. What about genetic engineering and genetically modified organisms? So under the National Organic Program, GMOs are generally prohibited. The farmers cannot use GMO seeds when they're planting. Livestock generally can't eat GMO feed, and the facility who's packaging foods cannot use GMO ingredients in an organic food product. And this last point can be a little confusing. But just think of it as like a vegetable soup. If it has organic potatoes, organic carrots, organic peas, organic corn, that's it. That's an organic vegetable soup. But if it also contains, GMO tomatoes, then it's not going to be certified as organic, even if the other 95 ingredients are organic. Now, the penalties for violating the GMO rule for organics is pretty strict. If you were found to have GMOs in your product or any prohibited substance, you can lose your certification and get a fine. But that all said, there's no specific tolerance levels for GMOs. So if there are trace amounts of GMOs within the product, the farm isn't necessarily violating organic regulations. So how do these violations happen? It could be on purpose. Maybe there's some dishonorable farmer who wants to make more money selling their product, but they don't want to actually spend their money on the organic certification and deal with all the risks and problems. Genetically engineered crops are easier to grow in some ways. But more likely, it's going to be that the GMO violation is an accident. There's a lot of cases of inadvertent or, just the seeds might fly over into the field. And I do have some slides on this at the very end. But, pesticide drift, herbicide drift, water runoff, seed drift, things can carry the seeds to another field. And then as they grow, now you've got some GMO seeds in your field. So this happens a lot by accident. And there are some ways to address it, but we are not going to address that here today. Okay, so back to our list of provisions with the Organic Foods Production Act. We are now moving on to the national list. So this is the national list of approved and prohibited substances for organics. Oh, and this is just your resource slide. So if you've downloaded the slides, here is your link to find this list. All right, first, let's talk about how the national list relates to crop production. This is just a sample on this slide of the synthetic substances that are allowed to be used for crop production. So we've got things like alcohols, ethanol and isopropyl, chlorine, copper sulfate, hydrogen peroxide, ozone gas, peracetic acid. Those are things that we are allowed to use. And that's just, if you have, dairy cows, you have to make sure that their udders are sanitized when you're producing milk. And then as far as herbicides go, you can use things like mulch or newspaper, which, I don't know how effective that is, but those are things that are allowed. Okay, now on this slide, we have a list of non-synthetic substances that can't be used for crop production. So I'm making this distinction because I think when you think of synthetic versus non-synthetic substances, we generally in our heads will consider non-synthetic substances to be safer. When I think of synthetic, I think of man-made materials like oil and plastics. And generally, when it comes to organics, many types of synthetic materials are going to be prohibited from the use relating to organic farming. But that's not going to be the case 100% of the time. Like we saw on the last slide, there are some important chemicals that we need to use to keep things clean and sanitary, and prevent biosecurity risks. On the other hand, this is a list of non-synthetic substances that are considered harmful and therefore may not be used in organic farming. I love the second one on the slide is arsenic. Yeah, can't use arsenic. You can't use ash from manure burning, calcium chloride, lead salts, potassium chloride, and a couple more here that I don't know how to pronounce. So even though, some things are non-synthetic, you can probably imagine why these are the prohibited substances. So if we're turning our attention back to livestock, I still mostly think about, produce, not meat, when I think about organic, because, you go to the grocery store and that's where I see a lot of labels in my hometown. But, as we saw on our fun fact slide at the beginning, livestock is huge in organics now. So what synthetic substances are allowed in livestock production? So it's very similar. So you can use alcohols, ethanol as a disinfectant. You're allowed to use aspirin. You are allowed to use atropine. And so atropine and some of these other things that they are allowed, they'll have this very specific rule. And that's actually why I included atropine as this example, because they'll have a cleanse period. But that, it has the time where you're allowed to give the substance to the animal, and then you have to wait until that substance is out of the system. So it's a meat withdrawal period of at least 56 days for livestock intended for slaughter, and milk discard period of at least 12 days after administration. So you'll have a window of time before you can use it. Now, when it comes to synthetic substances, USDA is responsible for providing some exemptions. So they are allowed to use synthetic substances when they are not harmful to human health or the environment. It's necessary for production. There's no other natural substitute available, and the use of these substances are consistent with organic farming. That is an and at the end of those bullet points and not an or, which means that whatever they're going to use has to meet all of these factors in order for the USDA to allow the use as something that would be qualified as organic. So for food handlers in the organic food process, so they have some restrictions in what they're able to do and use. And there are some mechanical and biological methods that are specifically allowed and methods that are prohibited. So there's a lot of rules on how the foods are processed and packaged, and we aren't going to go too far down that road, but I just wanted to address that really quickly. An interesting part of the national list is, we mentioned this a little bit on the initial slide, we talked about product percentages that must be organic. And this law refers to the non-organic substances that are allowed in products. So products with small amounts of these substances may still be labeled organic or made with organic. So feel free to check out this list if you're bored. It has a lot of chemicals like the ones we just looked at. The difference is that this section is specific to food handlers. So there are synthetic and non-synthetic substances that food handlers can add to food for preservation, color, texture, things like that. So one of the big problems for organic farmers is dealing with pests. A conventional farmer can use the normal pesticides. Now, a farmer who uses genetically engineered crops may have the benefits of a specially herbicide-resistant plant, or maybe a plant that acts as a pesticide. Meanwhile, an organic farmer has none of those benefits and can be at a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to fighting pests. The control methods that are listed here, traps, lights, sound, so mechanical and physical controls, and that's what they're supposed to be using. And then if those mechanical or physical controls don't work, then they're allowed to use lures or repellents that anything that's on that national list. So this is one of the toughest things, I think, for organic farmers. And there was something in that survey, that 2021 survey that we referenced at the beginning, that talked about the issues and problems that new organic farmers faced. And this was definitely one of the top issues. Okay, and this is a little bit of a recap of what we just talked about. So if lights, traps, sounds don't work, they can go ahead and try to use some of these synthetic substances that are on the national list. Oh, and then if you do that, you have to update the operations organic handling plan. So anything on the handling plan is going to have to show what you tried first, what failed, and then what you ultimately ended up using to save your crop. Oh, and there's an exception, a lot of exceptions here. So if there's a natural disaster or a drought or something like that, the National Organic Program might grant you some reprieve from the requirements. That's something that you'll definitely want to talk to your certifier about before just assuming, but they do have some exemptions for natural disasters. So, if you are planning to use something for organic, something that's packaged or labeled, or feed product or something like that, and you're not sure if it's approved for it, USDA has this voluntary labeling program, which is very interesting. And so anything that meets this, the National Organic Program criteria that's to be used in organic production, they can add this label, this little, it's like 3 little leaves on you can see it on the slide here. And you have for organic production or for organic gardening is what it'll say. So if you want to know if you can use those seeds or whatever the product is, it might have this EPA label with the 3 little seeds that says it's for organic production. Which is the only time that EPA really gets involved in a lot of this stuff that I found, as far as, the overarching aspect of these laws. Okay, so I also threw in this slide because I love a graph and I love something that's going to show you the picture. So in this, you can see that there are over 900 synthetic active pesticide products that are registered for use in conventional farming. So you have that big block on this picture, and then you have this tiny little line of the 25 synthetic active pest control products that are allowed. So, and this is with, so this is with organic farming. And then on the next slide, I have something very similar. And so this is for organic livestock production on drugs. So there's over 550 synthetic active ingredients for animal drug products that are available and allowed for conventional farming, but only 37 synthetic livestock health treatments for organic livestock production. So there's a really big difference, and that is part of the struggle that new organic producers have when they are entering this field. Okay, so the last section on this that we have are procedures for investigation and enforcement under the Organic Foods Production Act. So the organic standards, these are enforced by the Agricultural Marketing Service and organic certifiers. Okay, so this involves inspecting and organic farms, and the business has to be inspected annually. They'll collect samples. Anytime that there's a violation, they're going to investigate that. If there's any violations, they might enter into some sort of settlement agreement and work things out with the organic farmer. And then ultimately, if things aren't corrected or are unable to be corrected, they may suspend the certification. And details of that, link at the bottom of the page. So we have a new rule, so many new rules with organics. So this rule was published January 19th, 2023. So just a little bit over a year ago. So this is the Strengthening Organic Enforcement Rule. And there's a great fact sheet on this. I definitely recommend checking it out if this is something that you're interested in. So links on the slide. So this rule requires for more business to have organic certification. So along the line of, the food as it makes its way through the process, more of those operations are going to have organic certification. And then there also needs to be National Organic Program import certificates for all organic imports. So there has to be identification. Any non-retail containers, you have to identify and label those properly. There's increased authority for on-site inspections. So instead of, like maybe please come to your property and check this out and take a look around. It's we're coming to your property and we're going to check things out and take a look around. And then they are standardizing certificates for organic operations, which is, keeping things standardized. And it's supposed to also increase fraud prevention. I'm not going to go into crazy detail about this because there's a lot on this rule, and today we're just doing a broad overview, a little bit of everything, but there is a lot here. If you're interested in learning more, I definitely recommend checking it out. For our purposes, I think this is so interesting. when we're talking about enforcement, there's actually an organic integrity dashboard that's published by the U.S. Department of Ag. And I just think this is so interesting. You've got these pie charts of what's going on. So as of 2022, and this is the most recent one that they have on their website. As of 2022, there were 470 cases in progress. So on the chart on the left here, apparently 55% of those cases was that it was an uncertified operation making organic claims, which is just something to note. Not every time that you buy something that says organic, it might not actually be organic. And that happens, it's common. And then there's outright fraud, which you can see that's 19% in that orange there. Some of the cases that were involve pesticide residue, labeling error, maybe they're doing some practice that's prohibited, or they're using a prohibited substance. So that's what the cases are generally about. And then as the outcome goes, on the right here, we have that pie chart. And so, it was just kind of a positive thing. You have the 65%, it's voluntary compliance. So in most cases, the producer is just going to comply with whatever the organic rules are. So that's a good thing. And then orange is where they determine that there actually was no violation. So that's 16% of cases. They do an investigation and then determine that there's actually no violation. And then we also have a little bit for fraudulent certificate is posted. They're referred to criminal investigation. There's a settlement, a penalty, an appeal, or administrative actions. So this is an interesting look at how enforcement happens and how things are dealt with if they are not up to their certification. Okay, so we have time here for me to move into some of my government assistance programs for organics. So we're done talking about the National Organic Program in general. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to put it in the Q&A or send me an email sometime, and I'd be happy to look at that. So there are a few different programs available. So if you are just getting into organics or just learning about this and you know someone who has a farm and they're interested in getting involved in this, but they're concerned about funding, if you aren't getting some sort of funding for your organic program, you're not doing it right. There are so many different programs out there available to you. The big one that I'm going to talk about is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So it's EQIP. I keep pronouncing it as EQIP. I don't know if that's right. But there was $2 billion put into that in 2023, or as of 2023. That's the funding for that. And then there's also the Organic Transition Initiative, OTI, and there was $300 million in that as well. So for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, they have the National Organic Initiative. So the EQIP funds the National Organic Initiative, and it's administered by NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And this provides a technical and a financial assistance. And this is going to farmers and ranchers who are transitioning to organic. So to be eligible, you have to have a certified organic certification from USDA. And you either have this certification or you are in the process of getting a certification and you're transitioning to organic. Oh, and I wanted to mention too that financial assistance through this program is limited to no more than $140,000 through the 2018 Farm Bill years, so 2019 through 2023. Moving on to the Organic Transition Initiative. So this one's actually broken down into two other programs that operated out of the Organic Transition Initiative. So we have the Organic Market Development Grant Program, which we're not going to use that acronym. And we're also going to, well, we might use the TOP acronym. So Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOP. TOP is a good acronym. They did a nice job with that one. But first, the Organic Market Development Grant. That is $75 million, and that funding was announced in May of 2023. So these are all sort of new grants that we're talking about today. And they put out $9 million January of this year. And then in March of this year, they announced the next round of funding for $40 million. So we can expect that there's going to be at least a third round at some point soon. And the purpose of this money is supposed to be support new and existing organic markets. It's supposed to improve processing capacity, explore new technologies, and purchase equipment to help meet the increasing demand. So that one's pretty broad as well. So market development is the focus there. And then moving into the last one, TOP, so Transition to Organic Partnership Program. For this program, the funding that it has is $100 million over 5 years. And this is for nonprofit organizations to provide technical assistance and support for transitioning and existing organic farmers. So one of the unique things that this program does is it connects mentor farmers to new farmers that are just transitioning from traditional conventional farming to organic farming. And it's creating these paid mentoring networks so that they can constantly have feedback and information about organic farming. And this is also going to provide support for technical, cultural, or financial shifts. So these are just some topics and things to keep an eye on. I'm actually surprised I didn't get any questions about hydroponics or aquaponics or aeroponics. And so for those of you who might not remember the difference at the top of your head, hydroponics is when you have plants that are grown in water with added nutrients. Aquaponics, those are plants that are grown in water with fish. And then you have aeroponics, and those are plants that are grown with no soil. So if you have one of those air plants in your home that you spray with water, that's aeroponics. And they actually add nutrients to the water that they spray to the roots of those plants. So the problem with these, and the reason that these are in the news, is because some organic organizations have argued against these methods because they do not improve soil. And this is relevant because the Organic Foods Production Act has a requirement that organic plants must have, or the organic plants, I said plants, but the plants themselves, they have to have provisions that are designed to foster soil fertility, primarily through proper tillage, crop rotation, and manuring. However, I'm going to go to my next slide here. So, however, USDA, the Ag Marketing Service, they have come out as of 2018, and their stance is that all three of those, hydroponic, aquaponic, aeroponic, they are eligible for organic certification. But I will also note that the National Organic Standards Board, they actually recommended in 2017 that aeroponics be removed from organic certification. And there's a ton more on this particular topic, but this is the short version of this ongoing discussion. And if you are very interested in it, I highly recommend checking out the National Ag Law Center's website. They've got a really great article about it with all sorts of details and information. So if you're interested in hydroponics, check them out. National Ag Law Center's website. The next thing in the news is that New Hampshire is going to end its accreditation as a National Organic Program Accredited Certifying Agent. And this was just announced last month, so February 17th, and it's going to be effective June 30th, 2024. And according to the press release, it's ending its accreditation as a certifying agent because of some budget issues. So there was a proposed bill that was going to allocate funds to the department to support the hiring of a part-time organic certification inspector, but that bill was ultimately voted down. And so it was like a couple of days later that the Ag Commissioner announced that they were going to discontinue the program. And I have some sources for that too. So if you have questions about New Hampshire, please send them my way. And so for those of you who are like, oh, which states have, are certifying agents? These are the states that are accredited with USDA as the certifying agents that can provide organic certification services. So as you can see, for dramatic effect, I have highlighted New Hampshire and crossed them out. Even though technically they still are certified, it's at the end of June. And then the last thing in the news that I'd like to highlight is for Pennsylvania. So on November 2nd, 2023, House Bill 157 was signed. This is going to create the PA Preferred Organic brand. Now, for those of you looking for that, I have searched for it. It's not out yet, but it's been created. We'll hopefully see more about what they're going to do with that soon. And this bill also provides $1 million to create a new organic center of excellence. And according to the press release, they are hoping to use this to grow the state's ability to support this sector of the industry. And that is it for me. And I also want to say a special thank you to my research assistant, Kendall Ashman, who worked super hard to make sure that I cited everything here properly and didn't give you guys bad links. So thank you, Kendall, and thank all of you for joining us today. I don't know if we have time for questions, but is there anything else, Audrey, that we want to jump to?
I think that's all. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. If you're looking for CLE credit, that link is in the chat there. Please fill out that form and get it back to us. If you need an out-of-state certificate, just notate that in the form. We'll get that to you. And hopefully we'll see everyone again in April for understanding the basics of producer protections for buyer default. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.